A powerful Arab executive made a decision that seemed justified at the time, firing his African secretary for chronic tardiness. But when security footage surfaced weeks later, it revealed a truth so shocking that it would shatter everything. He thought he knew about loyalty, sacrifice, and the people who work in the shadows of success. What the cameras captured would force him to confront a reality that challenged his entire understanding of the woman he had dismissed without a second thought. Stay until the end to discover how one moment of footage changed everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The 42nd floor of the Meridian Tower in downtown Chicago housed the most exclusive executive suites in the Midwest. Behind the floor-to-ceiling windows of the corner office, Rashid Thompson commanded a view that stretched across Lake Michigan, a fitting backdrop for a man who controlled a business empire worth over $2 billion. Everything in his world operated with Swiss precision, from the marble floors that gleamed under perfectly positioned lighting to the synchronized movements of his staff, who knew that even a minute's deviation from schedule could cost someone their career. Rashid had built his reputation on two fundamental principles: excellence and punctuality. The son of a wealthy Saudi businessman and an American mother, he had inherited his father's ruthless business acumen and his mother's Midwestern work ethic. By the age of 35, he had transformed a modest import business into a multinational conglomerate dealing in oil, technology, and luxury real estate. His success wasn't just measured in dollars, it was measured in the absolute control he maintained over every aspect of his professional life. The mahogany desk that dominated his office was always clear except for three items: a gold-plated pen set, a crystal paperweight engraved with his company logo, and a leather-bound planner where every minute of his day was accounted for. Rashid lived by schedules, and he expected everyone around him to do the same. Late meetings were unacceptable. Delayed reports were career-ending. In his world, time wasn't just money, it was respect, and anyone who wasted it was showing him the ultimate form of disrespect. This obsession with punctuality had earned him the nickname "the Clock" among his employees, though none would dare use it to his face. Board meetings started precisely at the scheduled time, regardless of who was missing. Conference calls began whether all participants had joined or not. It was a system that had worked flawlessly for 15 years, creating a corporate culture where efficiency reigned supreme and excuses were extinct. But there was one person in his meticulously ordered world who had been testing the boundaries of his patience for months. Maya Johnson, his executive secretary. Maya had been with the company for 3 years, hired initially as a temporary replacement for his previous secretary who had retired after 2 decades of service. What was supposed to be a 2-week assignment had turned into a permanent position when Rashid discovered that Maya possessed an almost supernatural ability to anticipate his needs. She could draft correspondence in his exact tone, manage his complex calendar with military precision, and handle delicate client relationships with a diplomacy that even he admired. Her work was impeccable. Her dedication was unquestionable. But for the past 4 months, she had been arriving late with increasing frequency. It started with 5 minutes here and there, barely noticeable gaps that Rashid initially overlooked because of her exceptional performance. But as weeks turned into months, the delays became more pronounced. 10 minutes became 15, 15 became 20. On one particularly frustrating morning, she had arrived a full 30 minutes late, rushing into the office with what appeared to be the same apologetic expression she had worn for weeks. Rashid prided himself on being a fair employer. He paid above-market salaries, offered comprehensive benefits, and provided opportunities for advancement that other companies couldn't match. In return, he expected loyalty, competence, and punctuality. Maya delivered on the first two expectations with remarkable consistency, but her recent pattern of tardiness was becoming impossible to ignore. The other executives had begun to notice. During morning briefings, there would be subtle glances toward Maya's empty desk. Important calls were sometimes delayed because she wasn't there to coordinate the connections. Clients who were accustomed to speaking with her directly were being redirected to other staff members who lacked her specialized knowledge of their accounts. What frustrated Rashid most wasn't just the inconvenience, it was the principle. Maya was setting an example for the rest of the staff, and if he allowed her behavior to continue unchecked, it would signal that his standards were negotiable. The carefully constructed culture of excellence he had built over 15 years could unravel if employees began to believe that rules applied differently to different people. He had tried the diplomatic approach first. 3 weeks earlier, he had called Maya into his office for what he termed a casual conversation about expectations. He had been careful to keep his tone measured, professional, avoiding any hint of accusation, while making it clear that punctuality was non-negotiable in his organization. Maya had listened with the same attentive focus she brought to all their interactions. She had apologized sincerely, offered assurances that the situation would improve, and promised that it wouldn't happen again. For exactly 4 days, she had arrived early, greeting him with her usual bright smile and efficiently coordinating his morning schedule. Then, without explanation, the late arrivals resumed. The second conversation, 2 weeks later, had been more formal. Rashid had documented the meeting in writing, outlining specific expectations and establishing a clear timeline for improvement. Maya had signed the document without protest, her signature as neat and precise as everything else she did. Again, she had managed to maintain punctuality for a brief period before reverting to her pattern of tardiness. This morning's incident had been the final straw. Maya had arrived 25 minutes late, slipping into the office while Rashid was on an important conference call with investors in Dubai. Through his office's glass walls, he had watched her quietly take her seat, power up her computer, and begin working with the same focused intensity she always displayed. But the damage was already done. He had been forced to apologize to the investors for the delay in receiving critical documents that Maya would have normally prepared and distributed before the call began. As he sat in his office that evening, the city lights beginning to twinkle across the Chicago skyline, Rashid made a decision that felt both inevitable and regrettable. Maya Johnson would have to go. Her exceptional skills couldn't compensate for her inability to respect the most basic requirement of professional employment. He would handle the termination personally, document it properly, and ensure that she received a generous severance package that reflected her years of otherwise exemplary service. It was a business decision, he told himself. Nothing personal. Just the natural consequence of an employee who couldn't adapt to clearly established expectations. What Rashid didn't know was that 23 floors below his office, in the building's security control room, hours of footage were being archived. Daily. Footage that would soon reveal that everything he thought he knew about Maya Johnson's morning routine was completely wrong. The truth captured by those cameras would not only vindicate her, but expose a reality so profound that it would fundamentally change how he viewed loyalty, sacrifice, and the hidden struggles of the people who worked tirelessly to maintain his perfectly ordered world. But for now, in the quiet of his executive suite, Rashid Thompson believed he was making a rational business decision based on observable facts. Tomorrow morning, he would call Maya into his office one final time, and their professional relationship would come to an end. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The next morning arrived with the crisp efficiency that Rashid Thompson had come to expect from his perfectly orchestrated world. At exactly 7:30 a.m., his personal driver dropped him off at the Meridian Tower's executive entrance. By 7:45, he was reviewing the day's agenda while his barista prepared his usual double espresso. At 8 sharp, he expected Maya Johnson to be at her desk, ready to begin another day of coordinating his complex business empire. At 8:15, her chair remained empty. Rashid stood at his office window, watching the morning rush-hour traffic crawl along Lakeshore Drive. His jaw tightened as he glanced at his Rolex, a gift from his father when he'd closed his first major deal. Time was slipping away, and with each passing minute, his frustration grew. He had an 8:30 conference call with the London office, a 9:15 meeting with potential investors from Dubai, and a critical presentation to prepare for the board meeting. Scheduled for 10:30, Maya's absence was creating ripples through his carefully planned schedule. At 8:22, she finally appeared. Through the glass partition that separated his office from the main workspace, Rashid watched Maya hurry to her desk. She moved with practiced efficiency, hanging her coat on the back of her chair, powering up her computer, and immediately reaching for the stack of documents that required his review. Her movements were fluid, purposeful, betraying no sign of panic despite her obvious lateness. But what caught Rashid's attention wasn't her professional composure. It was something else entirely. As Maya settled into her chair, he noticed her, discreetly checking her phone, not in the casual way someone might glance at social media, but with the focused intensity of someone expecting important information. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen, typing what appeared to be a brief message before tucking the device into her desk drawer. There was something in her posture that he hadn't noticed before, a tension that seemed to run deeper than the stress of being late for work. Her shoulders were rigid, and even from his distance he could see that her usually immaculate appearance showed subtle signs of strain. Her normally pristine blazer appeared slightly wrinkled, and her hair, though professionally styled, lacked its usual perfect arrangement. The intercom on his desk buzzed softly. "Mr. Thompson, your London call is ready to begin." Maya's voice came through with its characteristic calm professionalism, as if she had been at her desk for hours rather than minutes. "Transfer it through," Rashid replied, his tone deliberately neutral. But as he lifted the phone to begin his conversation with the London office, he found himself studying Maya through the glass wall. She was already deep into her morning routine, coordinating schedules, reviewing contracts, and managing the dozens of details that kept his business running smoothly. To any casual observer, she appeared to be the model of executive efficiency. Yet, Rashid couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed in Maya's demeanor over the past few months. It wasn't just the tardiness, though that remained the most visible symptom of whatever was affecting her performance. There were subtle shifts in her behavior that he was only now beginning to recognize. During meetings, Maya had always been the invisible force that kept everything running smoothly. She would anticipate his needs before he voiced them, provide documents at precisely the right moment, and manage interruptions with diplomatic skill. But recently, he had noticed moments when her attention seemed divided, brief instances when her usual laser focus would falter, and she would appear to be listening for something beyond the confines of the conference room. After concluding his call with London, Rashid made a decision that surprised even him. Instead of summoning Maya to his office for the termination conversation he had planned, he decided to observe her more carefully throughout the day. Something about her behavior was triggering his business instincts, the same intuition that had helped him identify profitable opportunities and potential problems in countless deals over the years. The morning progressed with its usual rhythm of calls, meetings, and strategic decisions. Maya performed her duties with her characteristic excellence, but Rashid found himself paying attention to details he had previously overlooked. During the 9:15 meeting with the Dubai investors, he noticed that Maya's phone, though silenced, would occasionally light up with what appeared to be text messages. Each time this happened, her eyes would flick toward the device for just a moment before returning to her notes. At 10:45, during a brief break between meetings, Rashid witnessed something that stopped him cold. Maya was at her desk, apparently, focused on preparing documents for his next appointment when her phone buzzed. The expression that crossed her face as she read the message was unlike anything he had seen from her before. For just a moment, her professional mask slipped, revealing something raw and vulnerable. Her hand went to her throat, and she closed her eyes briefly, as if fighting back an emotion too powerful to contain. The moment passed quickly. Within seconds, Maya had composed herself, slipped the phone back into her drawer, and returned to her work. But the image of her face in that unguarded moment lingered in Rashid's mind. Whatever was causing her chronic lateness, it was clearly something far more serious than simple disorganization or lack of commitment. As the day progressed, Rashid found himself postponing the termination conversation he had planned. His logical mind insisted that personal problems, however serious, couldn't excuse professional failures. But his instincts, honed by years of reading people in high-stakes business negotiations, were telling him that there was more to Maya's situation than met the eye. During lunch, while Maya was away from her desk, Rashid made an impulsive decision that went against every principle of employee privacy he normally observed. He asked building security to review the morning's entrance footage, ostensibly to verify the exact times of Maya's arrivals over the past month. What he told them was that he needed documentation for HR purposes related to punctuality issues. What he didn't tell them was that his real motivation was curiosity about what might be causing his most reliable employee to suddenly become unreliable. The security supervisor, eager to accommodate one of the tower's most prominent tenants, assured Rashid that they could compile the footage within a few hours. The building's state-of-the-art surveillance system captured everything from the parking garage to the executive floors, creating a comprehensive record of daily activities. By 3 p.m., Rashid had the footage compilation on his desk, stored on a secure digital drive. But as he prepared to review it, Maya knocked on his office door. "Mr. Thompson, you wanted to see me?" she asked, her voice carrying its usual professional warmth. Rashid looked up from his desk, the security footage drive suddenly feeling like it weighed 10 pounds. Maya stood in his doorway, looking composed and attentive, ready to handle whatever task he might assign. But now he could see what he had missed before, the barely perceptible lines of fatigue around her eyes, the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her smile seemed to require just a fraction more effort than it once had. "Actually, Maya," he said, sliding the drive into his desk drawer, "I wanted to discuss your schedule for tomorrow. There have been some changes to the afternoon meetings that will require coordination with the Singapore office." It wasn't true, but it bought him time. As Maya pulled out her tablet to review the supposed changes, Rashid made a decision that would alter the course of both their lives. Instead of firing her based on what he thought he knew, he would first discover what the security cameras had captured. Whatever truth those recordings contained would determine not just Maya's fate, but his own understanding of the loyalty and sacrifice that had been happening right under his nose for months. The following evening, Rashid Thompson sat alone in his penthouse apartment overlooking Chicago's Gold Coast, the security footage resting on his granite kitchen counter like a piece of evidence from a crime scene. The irony wasn't lost on him that he, a man who prided himself on direct communication and transparent business practices, was about to spy on his own employee through surveillance footage. His apartment reflected the same meticulous attention to detail that characterized his office. Clean lines, expensive furnishings, and not a single item out of place. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city's skyline, but tonight Rashid found himself staring at the small digital drive instead of the urban landscape that usually helped him think through complex business decisions. He poured himself 2 fingers of 25-year-old Macallan, a ritual he reserved for the most challenging negotiations. But this wasn't about closing a deal or outmaneuvering a competitor. This was about understanding why his most trusted employee had suddenly become unreliable, and more importantly, why his instincts were telling him there was far more to the story than simple tardiness. With his laptop open on the dining table, Rashid inserted the drive and began reviewing the compiled footage. The security supervisor had been thorough, providing timestamps and multiple camera angles covering Maya's arrivals over the past 6 weeks. What Rashid expected to find was confirmation of what he already knew, that Maya had been consistently arriving late without apparent justification. What he discovered instead challenged every assumption he had made about her situation. The first thing that struck him was the parking garage footage. Maya's arrival pattern wasn't random or indicative of someone who simply couldn't manage their morning routine. The timestamps showed that she actually arrived at the building complex every morning between 7:45 and 7:50 a.m., well before her scheduled start time. She was parking in the garage, exiting her car promptly, and then disappearing from the cameras for 20 to 30 minutes before appearing in the lobby. Intrigued and increasingly puzzled, Rashid fast-forwarded through several days of footage, watching the same pattern repeat itself with remarkable consistency. Maya would park, gather her belongings, walk toward the elevators, and then vanish from the surveillance system's view until she appeared upstairs, rushing to her desk with the apologetic expression he had grown accustomed to seeing. The building's garage had multiple levels and several blind spots, where the older security cameras couldn't capture activity. Rashid made a mental note to contact the security supervisor about the coverage gaps, but more immediately, he needed to understand what Maya was doing during those missing minutes every morning. As he continued reviewing the footage, another pattern emerged that he hadn't noticed during his casual observations at work. On the days when Maya appeared most stressed, when her lateness extended beyond 20 minutes, the lobby cameras captured her making brief phone calls before entering the elevator. Her body language during these conversations was tense, urgent, and completely at odds with the composed professional demeanor she maintained once she reached the office. One particular clip from 3 days earlier showed Maya pacing near the lobby's marble columns while engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation. Even without audio, Rashid could see the emotion in her gestures, the way her free hand moved to her forehead in a gesture of frustration or despair. The call lasted exactly 4 minutes and 12 seconds, after which she straightened her jacket, composed her expression, and rode the elevator to the 42nd floor with the same professional bearing she displayed every day. Rashid leaned back in his chair, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Each piece of footage was revealing a completely different narrative than the one he had constructed in his mind. Maya wasn't carelessly disregarding punctuality. She was dealing with something that required her attention every morning before she could focus on her professional responsibilities. His business instincts, sharpened by years of analyzing complex situations for hidden opportunities and risks, began working through the implications. If Maya was consistently arriving at the building on time, but was delayed by something happening on the premises, then her tardiness wasn't a matter of personal time management. It was something else entirely. The most revealing footage came from a camera positioned near the building's medical center on the 15th floor. The timestamp showed yesterday morning at 7:52 a.m., exactly during one of Maya's missing periods. The camera captured her exiting the elevator, walking quickly down the corridor and entering the medical facility. 18 minutes later, she emerged, paused briefly to check her phone, and then returned to the elevator. Rashid felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening breeze coming off Lake Michigan. Maya was visiting the building's medical center every morning before work. Not occasionally, not randomly, but with the regularity of someone dealing with an ongoing medical situation that required consistent monitoring or treatment. He fast-forwarded through more footage, tracking Maya's pattern over the past month. The visits to the medical center were documented with clockwork precision every single morning between 7:50 and 8:10 a.m. On days when her medical appointment ran longer, she would arrive at her desk later, always apologetic, never offering an explanation that might reveal her private medical situation. The realization hit Rashid like a physical blow. For months, he had been judging Maya's professionalism based on incomplete information. While he had been calculating the minutes of her tardiness and questioning her commitment to the job, she had been managing a health crisis that she had chosen to handle privately, without asking for accommodations or special treatment. More footage revealed additional pieces of the puzzle. Security cameras in various parts of the building showed Maya making brief calls to what appeared to be the same number, possibly coordinating medical appointments or checking on test results. Her phone. Conversations in the lobby weren't signs of casual personal business. They were the communications of someone navigating a serious health situation while trying to maintain their professional responsibilities. Rashid closed the laptop and walked to his window, looking out at the city lights that stretched toward the horizon. The security footage had provided answers, but those answers had generated entirely new questions that made him deeply uncomfortable with his planned course of action. Maya Johnson hadn't been disrespecting his time or challenging his authority. She had been quietly managing what appeared to be a significant medical situation while maintaining the same level of professional excellence she had always delivered. She had chosen not to disclose her health challenges, possibly to avoid being treated differently or potentially losing her position due to perceived limitations. The weight of his near mistake settled heavily on his shoulders. Tomorrow morning, he had planned to terminate Maya's employment based on what he now understood to be a completely false premise. If he had proceeded with that decision, he would have fired an employee who was demonstrating extraordinary dedication by continuing to perform at the highest level, while dealing with personal circumstances that would have justified requesting significant accommodations. But the footage had also revealed something else that troubled him deeply. Maya's morning medical appointments were clearly ongoing, regular, and necessary. Whatever health challenge she was facing, it wasn't a temporary situation that would resolve itself quickly. The pattern suggested treatment, monitoring, or management of a chronic condition that required consistent medical attention. As Rashid prepared for bed that night, he realized that his investigation had transformed a simple personnel issue into something far more complex. He now possessed knowledge about Maya's private medical situation that she had never chosen to share with him. More importantly, he had to decide how to proceed with this information without violating her privacy or creating an uncomfortable dynamic in their professional relationship. The security footage had solved the mystery of Maya's tardiness, but it had also created an entirely new dilemma that would test everything he thought he knew about leadership, compassion, and the invisible struggles of the people who worked to make his success possible. Rashid Thompson arrived at his office the next morning, carrying the weight of knowledge he wished he didn't possess. The security footage had revealed Maya's medical situation, but it had also created a complex ethical dilemma that kept him awake most of the night. As he settled into his executive chair at exactly 7:30 a.m., he found himself watching the elevator banks through his office windows, waiting for Maya's arrival with an entirely different perspective than he'd had just 24 hours earlier. 7:48 a.m. He watched her emerge from the elevator on the 42nd floor, moving with the same purposeful stride she always displayed. But now he knew that she had already been in the building for nearly an hour, managing whatever medical situation required her daily attention. The knowledge sat uncomfortably in his chest. He possessed intimate details about his employees' private struggles that she had never chosen to share with him. Maya knocked on his office door at exactly 8:30, carrying the morning briefing materials, and wearing the same professional smile that had masked her personal challenges for months. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. The quarterly reports from the Dubai office arrived overnight, and I've prepared the comparative analysis you requested for the board meeting." Her voice carried its usual confident tone, but Rashid now noticed subtle signs he had previously missed. The slight tension around her eyes, the way she held her shoulders just a fraction higher than natural, the almost imperceptible pause before she spoke, indicators of someone carrying a burden far heavier than quarterly reports and meeting schedules. "Thank you, Maya. Please, have a seat." She settled into the chair across from his desk, tablet ready, prepared for what she assumed would be another routine morning briefing. But Rashid found himself studying her face with new eyes, seeing past the professional facade to recognize signs of someone fighting a battle she had chosen to fight alone. "Maya, I need to ask you something, and I want you to know that your answer, whatever it is, will remain completely confidential." Her posture shifted almost imperceptibly, a subtle stiffening that suggested his words had triggered some internal alarm. "Of course, Mr. Thompson. Are you facing any personal challenges that might be affecting your work schedule? I'm not asking for details, and you're under no obligation to share anything you're not comfortable discussing. But if there are circumstances that require flexibility in your schedule, I'd rather address them directly than continue with the current situation." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken truths. Maya's hands, usually steady and confident, trembled slightly as she placed her tablet on her lap. For a moment, her carefully maintained professional mask wavered, revealing a vulnerability that made Rashid's chest tighten with unexpected emotion. "Mr. Thompson, she began, then stopped, her voice catching on words that seemed too difficult to speak aloud. "Maya, you've been an exceptional employee for 3 years. Your work quality has never wavered. Your dedication has been absolute, and your discretion in handling sensitive matters has been invaluable. If there's something affecting your schedule, I'd rather find a solution than lose someone of your caliber." The words hung in the air between them, and Rashid watched as Maya made an internal calculation, weighing the risks of disclosure against the potential consequences of continued silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "My daughter Zoe is receiving treatment at the medical center downstairs. She has leukemia." The simple statement hit Rashid like a physical blow. In all his scenarios about Maya's tardiness, he had never imagined anything this serious. He had prepared himself for various explanations, personal issues, family problems, even another job opportunity, but not this. "Every morning I bring her to the building early because it's easier than trying to coordinate separate transportation. The medical center opens at 7:45, and she has blood work, medication adjustments, or consultations with her oncology team before school. The appointments usually take 15 to 20 minutes, but sometimes they run longer if there are complications or if the results require immediate attention." Maya's voice grew stronger as she continued, as if the act of finally sharing her burden was providing some relief from the weight she had been carrying alone. "I never mentioned it, because I didn't want to be treated differently, or to have people constantly asking about her condition. Zoe is 8 years old, and she's incredibly brave, but she's also very private about her illness. She made me promise not to tell people at work because she doesn't want to be the sick kid when I talk about her. Rashid felt a mixture of admiration and shame washing over him. Admiration for Maya's strength in managing such an enormous challenge, while maintaining her professional excellence, and shame for the assumptions he had made without seeking to understand the full picture. Maya, I had no idea. I'm so sorry you've been dealing with this alone. She shook her head quickly. It's not your responsibility, Mr. Thompson. I chose not to disclose it because I wanted to handle it privately. Zoe's treatment is going well. Her doctors are optimistic, but the schedule is demanding, and some mornings are more challenging than others. How long has she been in treatment? 4 months. The same time my tardiness began. Maya's smile was sad but genuine. I know it's been noticed, and I know it's not fair to you or the other staff members. I've been trying to manage both responsibilities without compromising either, but I realize that my solution hasn't been working. Rashid leaned back in his chair, processing information that recontextualized every interaction he'd had with Maya. Over the past several months, every late arrival had been preceded by a mother ensuring her sick child received necessary medical care. Every apologetic expression had masked the stress of juggling treatment schedules with professional responsibilities. Every day, Maya had chosen to prioritize her daughter's health while still delivering exceptional work performance. Maya, why didn't you tell me sooner? We could have adjusted your schedule, arranged for flexible hours, anything that would have made this easier for you and Zoe, because I've seen how other people react when they learn about childhood cancer. Either they become overly sympathetic and start treating you like you're fragile, or they become uncomfortable and start avoiding you because they don't know what to say. I didn't want either reaction. I just wanted to do my job well while taking care of my daughter. The profound strength required to maintain such composure while managing a child's serious illness struck Rashid with unexpected force. He had built his career on identifying and nurturing talent, but he realized he had completely failed to recognize the extraordinary character of the woman sitting across from his desk. What can I do to help? What accommodations would make this situation more manageable for both of you? Maya looked surprised, as if she hadn't expected the conversation to take this direction. Mr. Thompson, I don't want special treatment. I just want to continue doing my job well while ensuring Zoe gets the care she needs. That's exactly what we're going to make sure happens. From now on, your official start time is 8:30 a.m. That gives you the flexibility to handle Zoe's morning appointments without rushing or feeling pressured about punctuality. Additionally, if there are days when her treatment requires more time or if there are medical emergencies, you have my full support to adjust your schedule as needed. The relief that crossed Maya's face was profound, as if a weight she had been carrying for months had suddenly been lifted from her shoulders. I don't know what to say. Thank you. You don't need to thank me, Maya. You should never have had to manage this alone. As Maya left his office to return to her desk, Rashid sat in the quiet of his executive suite, fundamentally changed by the conversation. The woman he had nearly fired for tardiness was actually a hero. A mother fighting for her child's life while maintaining professional excellence that most employees couldn't achieve under normal circumstances. The security footage investigation had revealed Maya's medical visits, but this conversation had uncovered something far more important: the extraordinary strength and dedication of someone who had chosen to bear an enormous burden alone rather than compromise her professional standards or her daughter's privacy. For the first time in his career, Rashid Thompson realized that true leadership wasn't about enforcing rules. It was about understanding the human stories behind those rules and adapting to support the people who made his success possible. 2 weeks after his conversation with Maya, Rashid Thompson found himself experiencing something he had never encountered in 15 years of business leadership: genuine concern for an employee that extended far beyond professional performance. The accommodation he had offered Maya seemed simple enough: flexible morning hours to manage her daughter's medical appointments, but he soon discovered that the situation was far more complex than either of them had initially realized. It began with small observations that most managers would never notice. Maya's lunch breaks had become increasingly brief, often lasting only 15 minutes instead of the standard hour. She would eat quickly at her desk while reviewing documents, declining invitations from other staff members to join them in the building's executive dining room. When Rashid asked about it casually, she explained that she preferred to use her lunch hour for personal errands, but something about her evasive response triggered his now heightened awareness of her hidden struggles. The breakthrough came by accident. Rashid had stayed late one evening to prepare for a crucial presentation to the board of directors, working past 9 p.m. in his office, while the rest of the 42nd floor sat empty and silent. As he was gathering his materials to leave, he noticed lights still on in Maya's workspace. Curious, he walked over to investigate and found her at her desk, surrounded by medical insurance forms, prescription receipts, and what appeared to be hospital billing statements. "Maya, I thought you left hours ago." She looked up, startled, quickly gathering the papers as if she had been caught doing something inappropriate. "Mr. Thompson, I'm sorry. I know it's late, but I needed to handle some personal paperwork, and this seemed like the best time to do it without disrupting work hours." "You don't need to apologize for being here, but why are you dealing with this at the office instead of at home?" Maya hesitated, her hands still clutching the stack of medical documents. In the fluorescent lighting of the empty office, Rashid could see the exhaustion etched in her features, not just the tiredness that comes from a long day, but the deeper weariness of someone carrying an overwhelming burden. "Zoe doesn't know how expensive her treatment is," Maya said quietly. "I handle all the insurance calls, billing disputes, and payment arrangements when she's not around. She's 8 years old, and she's already dealing with enough. She doesn't need to worry about whether we can afford her medication or if the insurance company is going to approve her next round of treatment." The stack of papers in Maya's hands represented what Rashid now understood was a second full-time job, navigating the complex world of pediatric cancer treatment, insurance authorizations, specialist referrals, and medical billing. While maintaining her professional excellence during business hours, Maya was spending her evenings and lunch breaks fighting bureaucratic battles to ensure her daughter's care continued uninterrupted. "Maya, how are you managing the financial aspect of Zoe's treatment? If you don't mind me asking." She looked uncomfortable with the question, but after a moment, she answered with the same directness she brought to all their professional interactions. "Insurance covers about 60% of the costs. The rest comes from savings, a second mortgage on my house, and payment plans with the hospital. It's manageable," she added quickly, though her definition of manageable clearly differed significantly from most people's understanding of the word. Rashid felt something shift inside his chest, a recognition that went beyond empathy into genuine outrage. Maya Johnson, one of the most competent professionals he had ever worked with, was quietly bankrupting herself to save her daughter's life while maintaining the same level of work performance that had earned his complete trust and respect. "Have you looked into the company's medical hardship fund?" Maya's expression showed genuine surprise. "I didn't know we had one. It's not widely advertised, but it exists specifically for situations like this. Employees facing extraordinary medical expenses can apply for assistance. The fund is substantial. It's been growing for years because we rarely have situations that qualify for its use. Mr. Thompson, I appreciate the information, but I don't want charity. I've always paid my own way, and I don't want to be treated differently because of our circumstances. Her pride was evident, but Rashid could also see the relief flickering in her eyes at the possibility of financial support. He recognized the internal conflict of someone who had spent their entire adult life being self-sufficient, suddenly facing expenses that no amount of personal responsibility could cover. Maya, this isn't charity. You've contributed to this fund through your employment here, just like everyone else. It exists because companies like ours recognize that extraordinary circumstances sometimes require extraordinary support. Using resources you've helped create isn't accepting charity. It's accessing benefits you've earned. Over the following days, Rashid found himself thinking about Maya's situation with increasing frequency. The medical hardship fund application would help with the financial burden, but it wouldn't address the exhausting schedule she was maintaining or the emotional toll of managing a child's serious illness while projecting professional competence. Every day, he began researching pediatric cancer treatment, something he had never had reason to learn about before. What he discovered was sobering. Childhood leukemia treatment typically lasted 2 to 3 years, involving multiple phases of chemotherapy, regular hospital stays, and constant monitoring for complications. The survival rates were encouraging, but the treatment process was grueling for both patients and families. More importantly, he learned that the emotional and logistical challenges often extended far beyond the medical appointments he had initially accommodated. Children in treatment often experienced unpredictable symptoms that could require emergency medical attention. Routine schedules were frequently disrupted by fever spikes, medication reactions, or changes in treatment protocols. Armed with this new understanding, Rashid made a decision that went far beyond typical employer accommodations. He called Maya into his office on a Friday afternoon, when the rest of the staff was beginning to wind down for the weekend. Maya, I want to discuss expanding the accommodations we've put in place for Zoe's treatment schedule. She looked concerned, as if she might be in trouble for something. Is there a problem with the current arrangement? Not a problem, but I think we need to be more realistic about what you're dealing with. I've been doing some research about pediatric cancer treatment, and I realize that morning appointments are just one aspect of a much more complex situation. Maya's professional mask wavered slightly, revealing surprise that her employer had taken the time to educate himself about her daughter's medical condition. From now on, you have unlimited flexibility with your schedule. If Zoe has a bad night and needs to stay home, you work from home. If she has an emergency appointment, you leave immediately without worrying about meetings or deadlines. If she needs you to be present during treatment sessions, you're present. Your job responsibilities will be covered by other staff members, and your position will remain secure regardless of how much time you need to spend on her care. Maya stared at him for a long moment, as if processing words she had never expected to hear from any employer. Mr. Thompson, I don't know what to say. That level of flexibility, it's more than I ever imagined asking for. You shouldn't have had to ask for it, Maya. You should have been able to assume that any decent employer would provide it automatically. As she left his office that evening, Rashid realized that his understanding of leadership had fundamentally changed. True authority wasn't about enforcing compliance with arbitrary rules. It was about creating conditions where exceptional people could thrive despite extraordinary challenges. The conversation had revealed something else that would stay with him long after Maya returned to her desk. The quiet heroism of ordinary people facing impossible situations with grace, dignity, and strength that far exceeded anything he had ever demonstrated in his business career. Maya Johnson wasn't just an excellent employee who happened to be dealing with a personal crisis. She was a woman of remarkable character who had been fighting the most important battle of her life while ensuring that no one around her suffered because of her struggles. And until now, she had been fighting that battle completely alone. 3 weeks into Maya's new flexible schedule arrangement, Rashid Thompson was reviewing quarterly projections in his office when his assistant buzzed through the intercom with an unusual request. "Mr. Thompson, there's a young girl here to see you. She says her name is Zoe Johnson, and she's Maya's daughter." Rashid felt his stomach tighten with immediate concern. Maya had taken the morning off for what she described as a routine appointment. But children didn't typically visit corporate executives unless something significant had happened. He quickly cleared his desk and instructed his assistant to send Zoe in immediately. The door opened, and a small figure entered his office with surprising confidence. Zoe Johnson was petite for her 8 years, with bright eyes that held an intelligence far beyond her age. She wore a colorful knit cap that couldn't quite hide the fact that chemotherapy had claimed most of her hair, but her smile was radiant and genuine. In her hands, she carried a carefully wrapped package and a handwritten note. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Zoe. My mum talks about you all the time." "Hello, Zoe. It's wonderful to meet you. Please have a seat." Rashid gestured to one of the leather chairs across from his desk, watching as she climbed up and settled herself with the same composed dignity he had observed in her mother. "Is your mum okay? Is everything all right?" Zoe nodded enthusiastically. "Oh yes, she's fine. She's downstairs talking to Dr. Williams about my blood work results. They're really good this time. My white cell count is much better than last month." The casual way she discussed her medical condition struck Rashid with unexpected force. This child was living with a reality that would terrify most adults, yet she spoke about blood work and treatment outcomes with the matter-of-fact tone of someone discussing the weather. "That's wonderful news, Zoe. But what brings you to see me?" "Today," she held up the wrapped package, her expression becoming more serious. "I wanted to thank you for being so nice to my mom. She doesn't know I'm here. She thinks I'm in the waiting room reading. But I had to tell you something important." Rashid leaned forward, intrigued by the intensity in her young voice. "My mom cries sometimes at night when she thinks I'm asleep. Not because she's sad about me being sick. I know she's not sad about that because we're going to beat this cancer together. She cries because she's worried about work and money and making sure I have everything I need." The directness of her statement hit Rashid like a physical blow. This 8-year-old child was not only battling a life-threatening illness, but was also acutely aware of the financial and emotional strain her treatment was placing on her mother. "But she doesn't cry anymore, not since you started letting her come to my appointments without being worried about being late. She told me you said she could take care of me whenever I need her, and that made her really happy." Zoe unwrapped the package carefully, revealing a handmade card decorated with crayon drawings of flowers, rainbows, and what appeared to be a tall building with many windows. "I made this for you. That's your building," she said, pointing to the colorful skyscraper. "And that's you in the window," she added, indicating a stick figure wearing what looked like a tie. "The flowers are because my mom says you've been really kind to us, and kindness should always be celebrated with flowers." Rashid accepted the card with hands that trembled slightly. In all his years of receiving awards, recognition, and expensive gifts from business associates, nothing had ever moved him as profoundly as this child's artwork. "Zoe, this is beautiful. Thank you so much." "There's more," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I wanted to tell you a secret about my mom." "A secret?" "She's the strongest person in the whole world, but she doesn't know it. She thinks she's just doing what any mom would do, but that's not true. I see other kids at the hospital whose parents get really scared and sad, and sometimes they can't even stay in the room during treatments. But my mum holds my hand through everything, and she never lets me see her being scared. The wisdom in Zoe's words was startling. This child possessed an emotional intelligence that allowed her to see past her own illness, to recognize her mother's. Extraordinary strength and sacrifice. She works really hard to make sure I don't worry about grown-up things like money and insurance and all that stuff. She thinks I don't know, but I do. I know she gave up lots of things so I could have my treatments. She sold her car and got a smaller one. She stopped buying new clothes. She even sold her jewelry, the pretty necklace that used to belong to my grandma. Each revelation was like a dagger to Rashid's chest. While he had been focused on Maya's tardiness and professional performance, she had been systematically dismantling her own life to fund her daughter's medical care. But the most important thing I want you to know is that she never complains. Not ever. She tells me that taking care of me is the most important job in the world, and that everything else is just details. Zoe paused, studying Rashid's face with the perceptive gaze of someone who had learned to read adult emotions with survival-level accuracy. I can tell you're a good person, Mr. Thompson, because my mom smiles differently now when she talks about work. Before, when she talked about her job, she looked worried. Now she looks peaceful. That's because of you. Zoe, your mom is an exceptional person, and you're pretty exceptional yourself. She beamed at the compliment, then glanced toward the door. I should probably get back downstairs before she finishes with Dr. Williams. She worries when she can't see me, even though I'm perfectly safe here. As she prepared to leave, Zoe turned back with one final observation that would stay with Rashid for the rest of his life. Mr. Thompson, I know grown-ups think kids don't understand things, but I understand more than people think. My mom and I are a team, and we're going to beat this cancer together. But having people like you who care about us makes us stronger. It's like having extra teammates. After Zoe left his office, Rashid sat in stunned silence, still holding the handmade card. The stick figure drawing of himself in the window of the Meridian Tower seemed to stare back at him, with crayon eyes that held more wisdom than most of the business advisors he consulted with regularly. This 8-year-old child had just delivered the most profound lesson in leadership, compassion, and human dignity that he had ever received. She had shown him that true strength wasn't measured in quarterly profits or successful negotiations. It was measured in the quiet heroism of ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges with grace and determination. But more than that, Zoe had revealed the depth of sacrifice that Maya had been making while maintaining her professional demeanor. The jewelry, the car, the personal luxuries, all had been quietly surrendered to ensure her daughter's medical care continued without interruption. As Rashid looked out at the Chicago skyline, he realized that his perspective on success, leadership, and human value had been fundamentally altered by a conversation with a child who understood more about courage and resilience than most adults ever would. The handmade card sat on his desk for the rest of the day, a colorful reminder that sometimes the most important business lessons come from the most unexpected teachers. That evening, Rashid made a decision that would change not just Maya and Zoe's lives, but his own understanding of what it meant to use power and resources in service of something greater than profit margins and quarterly returns. The morning after his encounter with Zoe, Rashid Thompson arrived at his office with a sense of purpose that felt different from any business objective he had ever pursued. Zoe's handmade card sat prominently on his desk, the crayon drawing of the Meridian Tower serving as a constant reminder of the conversation that had fundamentally changed his understanding of what truly mattered in leadership. As he watched Maya, arrive at her usual 8:30 time. No longer rushing, no longer apologetic, he realized that providing flexible scheduling had been only the first step in addressing a situation that required a much more comprehensive solution. Maya's financial struggles, revealed through Zoe's innocent observations, demanded action that went far beyond standard corporate accommodations. Rashid spent the morning making a series of phone calls that had nothing to do with oil prices, investment portfolios, or quarterly projections. His first call was to Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a pediatric oncologist at Chicago Children's Hospital, whom he had met at various charity functions over the years. Dr. Mitchell, I need to understand something about childhood leukemia treatment. If you had unlimited resources to provide the best possible care for a patient, what would that look like? The conversation that followed was both educational and heartbreaking. Dr. Mitchell explained that while the public healthcare system provided adequate treatment, optimal care often required supplemental services that insurance companies frequently denied or delayed. Private room accommodations during hospital stays, access to experimental treatments, specialized nutrition support, psychological counseling for both patient and family, and comprehensive rehabilitation services could significantly improve both treatment outcomes and quality of life during the long recovery process. The difference between adequate care and optimal care, Dr. Mitchell explained, is often simply a matter of resources. Families with means can access concierge medical services, private specialists, and immediate approval for cutting-edge treatments. Families without those resources often face delays, denials, and compromises that can affect both the medical outcome and the emotional well-being of everyone involved. After ending the call, Rashid sat quietly in his office, processing the implications of what he had learned. Maya and Zoe were receiving adequate care through their insurance coverage, but they were missing out on the comprehensive support system that could make Zoe's treatment more effective and less traumatic for both of them. His second call was to Jonathan Hayes, the company's legal counsel and longtime friend. Jonathan, I need to explore setting up a special fund or foundation, something that could provide comprehensive medical support for an employee and her family. What are the legal and tax implications of that kind of arrangement? Are we talking about expanding the existing medical hardship fund or creating something entirely new? Something specifically designed to provide not just financial assistance, but comprehensive support services, medical advocacy, transportation, housing if needed, educational support for the family, essentially removing every possible barrier to optimal treatment and recovery. Jonathan was quiet for a moment before responding. Rashid, that's an incredibly generous concept, but it would essentially be creating a private foundation with one primary beneficiary. There are legal ways to structure that, but it raises questions about equity and precedent. Other employees might wonder why this particular situation receives such extraordinary support. Then we make it a policy, not an exception, Rashid said without hesitation. Any employee facing a family medical crisis of this magnitude receives comprehensive support. We establish clear criteria and make it part of our standard benefits package. The cost implications could be substantial. Jonathan, we spend more money on executive bonuses in a single quarter than this would cost annually. If we can afford to reward success, we can afford to support our people through genuine crises. The third call was to Marcus Rodriguez, the company's human resources director, who had been with the organization for 12 years and understood both its culture and its financial capabilities. Marcus, I want to create a new employee benefit program, and I need your expertise to make it both comprehensive and sustainable. Rashid outlined his vision, a crisis support program that would provide not just financial assistance, but a full range of services designed to allow employees to focus entirely on their family's medical needs, without worrying about work responsibilities, financial pressures, or logistical challenges. We're talking about medical advocacy services, private healthcare coordination, temporary housing, if treatment requires relocation, educational support for children who miss school due to treatment, psychological counseling for the entire family, and full salary continuation regardless of time missed from work. Marcus listened carefully before responding. It's an ambitious program, Mr. Thompson. The logistics alone would require dedicated staff to coordinate services and manage cases. But I think it's achievable, and frankly, it would set us apart as an employer in ways that could attract exceptional talent who value comprehensive benefits over just high salaries. Make it happen, Marcus. I want a full proposal within 2 weeks, and I want the program operational within 30 days. Sir, if I may ask, what's driving this initiative? Rashid glanced at Zoe's drawing on his desk, the stick figure in the window seeming to nod in approval. I've learned that sometimes the most valuable people in our organization are facing challenges we never see, and our standard approaches to employee support aren't adequate for extraordinary circumstances. We have the resources to do better, so we should do better. That afternoon, Rashid made a decision that surprised even him. Instead of working through Maya's situation via administrative channels and formal programs, he decided to take immediate personal action. He called his private banker and arranged for a substantial anonymous donation to be made directly to the hospital handling Zoe's care, specifically designated to cover any treatment costs not covered by insurance for the Johnson family. But the financial support was only part of his plan. Rashid also contacted Dr. Williams, Zoe's oncologist, at the Meridian Tower Medical Center to discuss arranging for additional consultations with specialists at Chicago Children's Hospital, ensuring that Zoe had access to the most advanced treatment options available. The most significant step, however, was a conversation he had with his own board of directors during their regularly scheduled meeting that week. I'm proposing that we establish a new corporate foundation focused on supporting employees through major family medical crises, he announced to the room full of executives and board members. The foundation would provide comprehensive support, services that go far beyond our current medical hardship fund. Board member Catherine Williams raised her hand. Rashid, what's the business justification for this level of employee support? How does it impact our bottom line? Catherine, the business justification is simple. Exceptional employees facing personal crises often leave their positions to manage those crises, taking their knowledge, skills, and relationships with them. We lose their contributions permanently, and we spend significant resources recruiting and training replacements who may never reach the same level of competence. He paused, looking around the room at faces that reflected varying degrees of skepticism and interest. But more importantly, this foundation represents our values as an organization. We can choose to be a company that extracts maximum value from our employees, or we can choose to be a company that supports our people through the most challenging periods of their lives. The latter approach creates loyalty, commitment, and reputation that no marketing campaign could ever achieve. The vote was unanimous. The Thompson Family Foundation for Employee Crisis Support was approved with an initial funding of $5 million and a commitment to annual contributions that would ensure its long-term sustainability. As Rashid prepared to leave the office that evening, he realized that his conversation with an 8-year-old girl had initiated changes that would affect not just Maya and Zoe's lives, but potentially hundreds of employees and their families in the years to come. Tomorrow, he would tell Maya about the foundation and the support services that would be available to her family. But tonight, He wanted to savor the unusual satisfaction that came from using his resources and influence for something that had nothing to do with profit margins and everything to do with human dignity and compassion. The stick figure in Zoe's drawing seemed to smile at him from its crayon window, and for the first time in his career, Rashid Thompson felt like he was truly earning the respect and trust that his position commanded. 6 months after the security footage investigation that had nearly led to Maya Johnson's termination, Rashid Thompson stood in the pediatric oncology wing of Chicago Children's Hospital, watching through a window as an 8-year-old girl rang the ceremonial bell that signified the completion of her cancer treatment. Zoe Johnson's radiant smile illuminated the entire corridor as doctors, nurses, and family members applauded her achievement. A victory that had required not just medical intervention, but the kind of comprehensive support system that Rashid had never imagined creating when he first became suspicious of his secretary's tardiness. The journey from that moment of frustrated judgment to this celebration of triumph had transformed not just Maya and Zoe's lives, but Rashid's entire understanding of leadership success and the responsibility that comes with power and resources. Maya stood beside her daughter, tears streaming down her face as she watched Zoe ring the bell with determined enthusiasm. Her hair had grown back in soft curls, and her energy was that of any healthy 8-year-old. But the real transformation was visible in Maya herself. The tension that had once defined her shoulders was gone, replaced by a confidence and peace that came from knowing her daughter's health was secure and her financial future was stable. "Mr. Thompson," Zoe's voice rang out as she spotted him in the corridor. She ran toward him with the kind of uninhibited joy that only children can express, holding up a certificate declaring her cancer-free status. "Look, I graduated from being sick." Rashid knelt down to meet her at eye level, accepting the certificate with the same solemnity he would show for any important business document. "Congratulations, Zoe. This is the most important graduation anyone could ever achieve," Mom says. "I couldn't have done it without you helping us. She says you're like a guardian angel, except you wear suits instead of wings." Maya approached, her professional composure softened by the emotional weight of the day. "Mr. Thompson, I don't know how to thank you for everything the Foundation has provided. The private consultations, the experimental treatment options, the family counseling services, none of this would have been possible without your support. The Thompson Family Foundation for Employee Crisis Support had exceeded even Rashid's ambitious vision for comprehensive care. Under Marcus Rodriguez's management, the foundation had coordinated every aspect of Zoe's treatment, from securing appointments with the top pediatric oncologists in the country to providing Maya with a dedicated case manager who handled all insurance communications and billing disputes. But the Foundation's impact had extended far beyond Zoe's medical care. Maya had been able to focus entirely on her daughter's needs, without worrying about work responsibilities, financial pressures, or the logistical nightmare that typically accompanies pediatric cancer treatment. The Foundation had covered not just medical expenses, but also transportation costs, temporary housing near the hospital during intensive treatment periods, and even educational support to help Zoe keep up with her schoolwork during recovery. "Maya, you don't need to thank me. What happened here was a team effort, and you were the most important member of that team." As they walked toward the hospital's family celebration area, where a small party had been organized to mark Zoe's recovery milestone, Rashid reflected on how fundamentally his priorities had shifted over the past 6 months. The Meridian Tower still housed his business empire, and the quarterly profits continued to grow at impressive rates. But the metrics that had once defined his success, revenue growth, market share expansion, operational efficiency, now seemed secondary to different measurements entirely. The foundation had supported 12 families through major medical crises, prevented 4 employees from leaving the company due to family health issues, and created a reputation for corporate compassion that had attracted exceptional talent from across the industry. More importantly, Rashid had discovered that using his resources to solve human problems provided a satisfaction that no business achievement had ever delivered. The letters from grateful families, the updates on successful treatments, and the knowledge that his decisions were directly improving lives had become more meaningful than any recognition he had received for professional accomplishments. During the celebration, Dr. Williams approached Zoe's final treatment summary with a comprehensive document that detailed her journey from diagnosis to recovery. "Mr. Thompson, I wanted you to see these statistics," Dr. Williams said, showing him the data. "Zoe's treatment outcome represents the best possible result we could have hoped for. The access to cutting-edge treatments and immediate response to complications made a significant difference in both the effectiveness of her care and her quality of life during treatment. What would have happened without those advantages? She still would have received good care, but the delays in accessing certain treatments, the stress of financial concerns, and the limitations of standard insurance coverage could have affected both her medical outcome and her family's emotional well-being. The comprehensive support system you provided didn't just treat her cancer. It allowed her to fight the disease from a position of strength rather than from a position of stress and uncertainty." As the afternoon celebration continued, Rashid found himself in conversation with Maya about her plans for returning to full-time work responsibilities. "Actually, Mr. Thompson, I've been thinking about my role with the company, and I have a proposal. I'm listening. The foundation needs someone who understands what families go through during medical crises, someone who can coordinate services, advocate for patients, and help other employees navigate the system the way I had to learn to navigate it. I'd like to transition into managing the foundation's day-to-day operations." The proposal was perfect, Rashid realized. Maya's experience as both a dedicated employee and a parent, managing a child's serious illness, had given her unique qualifications for helping other families in similar situations. "Maya, that's an excellent idea. You understand the challenges from both perspectives, as an employee trying to maintain professional responsibilities and as a parent fighting for your child's life. That combination of experience is exactly what the foundation needs." 3 months later, Rashid stood in his office looking out at the Chicago skyline, but his attention was focused on the framed photograph on his desk, a picture from Zoe's cancer-free celebration showing a healthy, happy child surrounded by the team of people who had supported her recovery. Maya had transitioned into her new role as Director of Family Crisis Support, where she was using her experience to guide other employees through medical challenges that might otherwise have destroyed their careers and their financial security. The foundation had expanded to support families dealing with various crises, not just medical emergencies, but also situations involving elder care, sudden disabilities, and other life-changing circumstances. But the most significant change was in Rashid himself. The executive who had once measured success purely in financial terms now understood that true leadership meant creating conditions where people could thrive despite extraordinary challenges. His business empire remained profitable and successful, but it was now also recognized as an industry leader in employee support and corporate social responsibility. The security footage that had initially been intended to document Maya's professional failings had instead revealed a story of strength, sacrifice, and quiet heroism that had transformed everyone involved. What began as a plan to terminate an employee for tardiness had evolved into a comprehensive support system that had saved a child's life and created a model for corporate compassion that other companies were beginning to emulate. As Rashid prepared to leave the office that evening, he glanced once more at Zoe's original handmade card, still displayed prominently on his desk. The crayon drawing of the Meridian Tower remained as bright and cheerful as the day she had given it to him. But now it represented something far more significant than a child's artistic expression. It represented the moment when a successful businessman had learned that true power wasn't about enforcing rules or maximizing profits. It was about using influence and resources to support the people who made success possible, especially when they needed that support most. The stick figure in the window no longer looked like just another executive in just another office building. It looked like someone who had learned to see past surface judgments to recognize the extraordinary strength and dignity of ordinary people facing impossible circumstances with grace and determination. And in that recognition, Rashid Thompson had found a form of success that no quarterly report could ever measure. But that had made him wealthier in ways that truly mattered than he had ever imagined possible. 1 year after Zoe Johnson rang the cancer-free bell, Rashid Thompson found himself standing before a packed auditorium at the Chicago Business Leadership Conference, preparing to deliver a keynote speech that would challenge everything the audience thought they knew about corporate success and employee management. The invitation had come from the conference organizers who had heard about the Thompson Family Foundation and wanted to understand how a traditional profit-focused company had transformed into an industry leader in employee welfare without sacrificing financial performance. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Rashid. 12 months ago, he had been a businessman whose primary concern was punctuality and operational efficiency. Now he was being asked to share insights about compassionate leadership with an audience of executives who were likely struggling with the same narrow perspective he had once held. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, looking out at the sea of suits and stern faces that reminded him of his former self. "I want to tell you about the most important business decision I almost made, and how not making it changed everything I thought I knew about leadership, success, and the true value of human capital." The audience leaned forward, expecting a typical corporate success story filled with strategic insights and market analysis. What they received instead was something far more profound. 15 months ago, I was preparing to fire my executive secretary for chronic tardiness. From a traditional business perspective, the decision was logical, justified, and necessary. She was violating basic professional standards, creating inefficiencies in our operations, and potentially setting a negative example for other employees. Rashid paused, allowing the audience to nod in recognition of a scenario they had likely encountered in their own organizations. "But before I terminated her employment, I made a decision that seemed insignificant at the time. I decided to investigate the root cause of her behavior through our building's security footage. What I discovered didn't just save her job, it fundamentally altered my understanding of what it means to lead people rather than simply manage employees." Over the next 45 minutes, Rashid shared the complete story of Maya and Zoe, from the initial surveillance investigation to the creation of the Thompson Family Foundation. He spoke about the hidden sacrifices that Maya had been making, the extraordinary strength she had demonstrated while managing her daughter's cancer treatment, and the comprehensive support system that had emerged from what began as a simple, scheduled accommodation. But the most powerful part of his presentation focused on the business outcomes that had resulted from this transformation in corporate philosophy. The foundation has now supported 23 families through major crises, and in every case, we retained employees who would otherwise have been forced to leave their positions to manage personal emergencies. The knowledge retention alone has saved us millions in recruitment and training costs. He clicked on a slide showing employee satisfaction surveys, retention rates, and productivity metrics. Our employee satisfaction scores have increased by 47%. Our retention rate for top performers has improved by 62%. Most significantly, our reputation as an employer has attracted talent that we previously couldn't recruit, allowing us to build teams with capabilities that directly translate to competitive advantages in the marketplace. A hand shot up from the audience. Mr. Thompson, what about the cost implications? Surely providing that level of support affects your bottom line. Rashid smiled, recognizing the question he would have asked 18 months earlier. The foundation operates on an annual budget of approximately $12 million, which represents less than 2% of our total revenue. To put that in perspective, we used to spend more than that amount annually on executive retreats and corporate entertainment. The return on investment has been extraordinary, not just in financial terms, but in ways that no traditional accounting system can measure. Another audience member raised her hand. How do you prevent abuse of such generous policies? How do you ensure that employees don't take advantage of this level of support? That's the most interesting aspect of this entire transformation, Rashid replied. We've discovered that when you treat people with genuine compassion and provide real support during their most vulnerable moments, they respond with loyalty and dedication that far exceeds what you can achieve through traditional incentive structures. We haven't had a single case of policy abuse because the people we're supporting understand the value of what they're receiving. After the presentation, Rashid was approached by dozens of executives asking for specific guidance on implementing similar programs in their own organizations. But one conversation stood out from all the others. A woman in her 50s approached him with tears in her eyes. Mr. Thompson, I'm Rebecca Chen, CEO of Midwest Manufacturing Solutions. 3 years ago, I fired my best project manager because her mother was dying of Alzheimer's disease, and she was missing too much work to provide care. I thought I was making a tough but necessary business decision. After hearing your story, I realize I destroyed a family's financial security during the worst period of their lives, and I lost an irreplaceable employee who could have continued contributing if I had just shown some creativity in finding solutions. The conversation with Rebecca Chen stayed with Rashid throughout his flight back to Chicago. Her story represented countless similar situations happening in corporations across the country. Talented, dedicated employees being discarded during personal crises because their employers lacked the vision to see beyond immediate operational concerns. That evening, Rashid called Maya to share how the presentation had been received and to discuss an idea that had emerged during his conversations with conference attendees. Maya, what would you think about expanding the Foundation's mission beyond our own employees? What if we created a consulting division that helps other companies develop their own crisis support programs? Maya's response was immediate and enthusiastic. Mr. Thompson, I receive emails every week from employees at other companies who've heard about our foundation. They're facing situations similar to what Zoe and I went through, but they have nowhere to turn for support. If we could help other organizations create similar programs, we could prevent thousands of families from facing the same impossible choices we almost had to make. Within 6 months, the Thompson Foundation Consulting Division was operational, working with companies across various industries to develop customized employee crisis support programs. Maya led the consulting team, using her unique perspective as both a former beneficiary and current administrator of comprehensive support services. The consulting division's first major client was Rebecca Chen's manufacturing company, where they implemented a program that had prevented the termination of 4 employees facing family medical crises within its first year of operation. But the impact extended far beyond individual companies. The model that had begun with Zoe's cancer treatment was becoming a movement within corporate America, challenging traditional approaches to employee management and demonstrating that compassionate leadership could coexist with profitable operations. Industry publications began featuring articles about the Thompson model of employee support, and business schools started incorporating case studies about the foundation into their leadership curriculum. What had started as one executive's decision to investigate rather than immediately judge had evolved into a paradigm shift that was influencing how corporations across the country approached their relationships with their workforce. Most importantly, the ripple effects were reaching families who would never know Rashid's name or Maya's story, but whose lives were being improved because their employers had learned that supporting employees through personal crises was not just morally right, but also strategically smart. As Rashid reflected on this unexpected journey from security footage investigation to industry transformation, he realized that the most significant changes often begin with the smallest decisions, like choosing to understand rather than assume, to investigate rather than judge, and to support rather than abandon the people whose dedication makes success possible. The 8-year-old girl who had walked into his office with a handmade card had unknowingly initiated a movement that was changing corporate culture one company at a time, proving that sometimes the most profound business innovations come not from strategic planning sessions or market analysis, but from the simple act of seeing employees as complete human beings worthy of compassion and support. 5 years after the security footage investigation that changed everything, Rashid Thompson stood in the newly constructed Thompson Family Crisis Support Center, a state-of-the-art facility adjacent to the Meridian Tower that served as headquarters for what had become the nation's largest corporate-sponsored employee welfare organization. The center housed medical advocacy services, financial counseling, legal assistance, childcare support, and mental health resources, all available to employees from over 200 companies that had adopted the Thompson model of comprehensive crisis support. The building's grand opening ceremony was attended by CEOs, government officials, and families whose lives had been transformed by the programs that had originated from one executive's decision to investigate rather than immediately judge. His secretary's tardiness. But the most honored guests were Maya Johnson, now Director of National Operations for the Thompson Foundation, and her daughter, Zoe, now 13 years old and a passionate advocate for pediatric cancer research. As Rashid walked through the center's corridors, he marveled at how far they had all traveled from that morning when he had sat in his office, frustrated by Maya's late arrival and convinced that termination was the only appropriate response. The walls were lined with photographs and letters from families who had been supported through crises that would have otherwise destroyed their financial security and professional careers. One display case contained particularly meaningful items. Zoe's original handmade card with its crayon drawing of the Meridian Tower, now protected behind museum-quality glass, alongside hundreds of similar thank you notes from children whose parents had been supported through medical emergencies, accidents, and family crises of every imaginable kind. "Mr. Thompson," came a familiar voice behind him. Maya approached with a tablet containing the center's monthly impact report. "I thought you'd want to see these numbers before your speech today." The statistics were staggering. Over the past 5 years, the Thompson Foundation and its partner organizations had prevented the termination of over 3,000 employees during family crises, supported 1,200 families through major medical emergencies, and provided crisis intervention services that had kept intact families that might otherwise have been torn apart by financial pressure and logistical impossibilities. But the numbers that meant the most to Rashid were more personal. 847 children had continued their education uninterrupted because their parents didn't have to choose between keeping their jobs and providing medical care. 423 elderly family members had received dignified care in their final months because their adult children didn't have to abandon their careers to provide support. 156 families facing sudden disabilities had maintained their homes and stability because comprehensive assistance allowed them to adapt rather than merely survive. Maya, when you look at these outcomes, what strikes you most? She considered the question carefully before responding. What strikes me most is how many of these crises were completely invisible to the employers before we created support systems to address them. Just like my situation with Zoe, there are thousands of employees every day who are quietly managing extraordinary challenges while trying to maintain professional performance. Most employers never see the sacrifices being made or understand the strength required to keep functioning normally during personal catastrophes. As they continued walking through the center, they passed the children's area, where Zoe was reading to a group of younger kids whose parents were receiving services from the foundation. At 13, she had developed into a poised, articulate advocate who spoke regularly at pediatric cancer fundraising events and served as a peer mentor for newly diagnosed children. "She's remarkable," Rashid observed, watching Zoe patiently help a 6-year-old sound out difficult words in a picture. "Book. She says she wants to become a doctor so she can help other kids the way Dr. Williams helped her. But more than that, she wants to make sure that no parent ever has to choose between their child's health and their job security. She remembers more about our struggles than I sometimes realize." The afternoon's dedication ceremony featured speakers from across the business community, including Rebecca Chen, whose manufacturing company had become one of the foundation's most successful implementation partners. But the most powerful moment came when Zoe approached the podium to address the assembled crowd of executives, philanthropists, and policymakers. "5 years ago, my mum used to cry at night because she was scared about being late to work while taking care of me during cancer treatment," Zoe began, her voice clear and confident. "She thought she might lose her job, and she was worried about how we would pay for my medicine if that happened. She tried to hide her fears from me, but I knew." The auditorium fell completely silent as this teenager shared her perspective on the crisis that had launched a national movement. What Mr. Thompson did for our family wasn't just about helping one kid with cancer. He showed everyone that when companies really care about their employees as people, not just as workers, amazing things happen. My mom became stronger, I got better, and now we help other families every day. She paused, looking directly at Rashid, with the same bright intelligence that had captured his attention during their first meeting in his office years earlier. "But the most important thing I learned is that most problems that seem impossible are actually solvable if people choose to understand instead of judge, and if they're willing to use their power to help instead of just to control." The standing ovation that followed Zoe's remarks lasted nearly 3 minutes, but Rashid barely heard the applause. He was remembering the 8-year-old child who had visited his office with a handmade card, and marveling at the young woman she had become, someone whose early experience with crisis had developed into a mature understanding of leadership, compassion, and social responsibility. Following the ceremony, Rashid returned to his original office in the Meridian Tower for a quiet moment of reflection. The space had been largely unchanged since that pivotal morning when he had reviewed security footage and discovered the truth about Maya's situation. Zoe's framed card still held its place of honor on his desk, but it was now accompanied by photographs documenting the evolution of their relationship and the growth of the foundation. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Mr. Thompson, this is David Martinez. You don't know me, but my wife Sarah works for a company that uses your foundation's services. Last month, when our son was diagnosed with autism and needed intensive therapy, her employer provided immediate support instead of questioning her schedule changes. I wanted you to know that your work is affecting families you'll never meet in ways you might never fully understand. Thank you for showing companies how to treat employees like human beings. Messages like David's arrived regularly now from spouses, children, and extended family members whose lives had been touched by the policies and programs that had emerged from Maya and Zoe's experience. Each message reinforced Rashid's understanding that the most meaningful business achievements weren't measured in quarterly earnings or market share, but in the human stories of crisis averted, dignity preserved, and hope restored. As evening settled over Chicago, Rashid prepared to leave his office for the last time as CEO of Thompson Industries. At 62, he was transitioning to a new role as full-time chairman of the Thompson Foundation, dedicating the remainder of his career to expanding the crisis support model nationally and internationally. Maya would be assuming his former position as CEO, bringing to the role a unique combination of business acumen and deep understanding of the challenges faced by working families. Her first initiative would be implementing a 4-day work week to give employees more time for family responsibilities and establishing satellite support centers in smaller cities where comprehensive services were desperately needed but rarely available. Before leaving, Rashid took one final look at the security monitor that displayed camera feeds from throughout the building. Somewhere in those daily recordings were countless stories of struggle, sacrifice, and quiet heroism that would never be discovered unless someone chose to look beyond surface observations to understand the complete picture. His transformation, from a manager focused on punctuality and compliance to a leader dedicated to human dignity and comprehensive support, had begun with a simple decision to investigate rather than assume. That choice had not only saved Maya's career and possibly Zoe's life, but had created a movement that was reshaping how American corporations approached their relationships with employees. The stick figure drawn in crayon on Zoe's original card had evolved into something far more significant than a child's representation of a businessman in an office building. It had become a symbol of leadership that recognized the complete humanity of every person within an organization, and the extraordinary achievements that became possible when power was used in service of compassion rather than control. As Rashid Thompson walked out of the Meridian Tower for the final time as its primary occupant, he carried with him the profound satisfaction of knowing that the most important decision of his career hadn't been about market expansion, profit maximization, or competitive strategy. It had been about choosing to see an employee as a complete human being worthy of understanding, support, and dignity, a choice that had transformed not just 3 lives, but an entire approach to corporate leadership that would continue creating positive change long after his own story had ended. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.